Hello, PDHP parents and community. It's Carrie Ann Fitzgerald from the Program for the Development of Human Potential. And we are looking at our Mindfulness Today is for You, which is our teacher's workshop on mindfulness, or our faculty workshop on mindfulness. We've been talking about a couple of things, the definition of mindfulness, what some experts say about mindfulness, why we kind of, want to think about the practice of mindfulness. And let's delve into a little more about reactions. We were talking about how we feel when we have these stressful or anxious reactions. Fair to say, our body goes through a lot of different reactions when we're talking about different emotional states. So let's take a look a little bit more. When we were talking on Friday, I mentioned, this is usually a worksheet that we bring to our workshops, and we also do this for the parents. We talk about, where do you feel your stress? And people will mark it off or write little notes or color it in sometimes, or write little ideas around the body, right, for the environment. So let's think about, we cite a lot of these things: headaches, tension. There's a science to that. Now, remember, the brain can only process 4 things at once. So when we're stressed or any reaction, we are taking in this emotional data, and our brain is processing that. So as the brain is processing it, it's perhaps looking at stress or anxiety like it's a threat. So that's the message that it's getting. So the body does what it's supposed to do. It's supposed to enact the nervous system to protect us from attacks. Now remember, cave people, our predecessors, would go through these stressful moments of fight or flight. Saber-toothed tiger, perception. Hopefully they have survived that. They sleep it off for about 10 hours, 14 hours in their cave. They're rejuvenated. Whereas for us, our brain can't determine what that threat is. Is the threat something dangerous like a saber-toothed tiger? Or is it the fact that we just got a text message? So our brain will perceive these threats, and it increases our heart rate. It constricts the blood vessels. It dilates other blood vessels. And that can cause those headaches that we talk about. This also slows our intestine and our glands. Our systems are flooded with cortisol, which is a stress hormone. And this will affect our short-term memory, so that we can focus on what that perceived danger is and not anything else, okay? So it does become harder to concentrate. Think about taking tests, okay, or public speaking or projects that you are presenting in class. Think about that from a student perspective, beyond even just us. When cortisol has been enacted for a long period of time, and remember, we often are, participants in this chronic stress, okay, in modern day life, our sleep-wake cycle can become disturbed. We can experience moodiness, feelings of being overwhelmed, helpless, angry. These are all stress responses. We suffer memory loss because, remember, we're perceiving this one thing. We're focusing on this one thing, or just a few things that are interrelated. The pituitary gland releases cortisol, which also increases our blood pressure. It causes our bloodstream to be flooded with glucose and fat so that we have that burst of energy, but it diminishes our appetite and activates our thyroids, which causes urine production and sweating to increase. Our body overuses our reserves of B vitamins and rids itself of calming magnesium. Now remember, a lot of times people will talk about those B vitamins as being the stress antidote. Our hearts are having a hard time pumping blood, and stress hormones cause inflammation and buildup An overproduction of cholesterol occurs, and stress eating will be our outcome from that. So that doesn't help the situation whatsoever, even though these are things that we're craving at the time. The blood flows to the muscles, so we may feel a bit nauseous or get that feeling of butterflies, that excited nervousness. And this repeats itself, but we get a sensation of relief. However, that sensation is being tired, but feeling hyper because all this energy is released in our body. Adrenal fatigue is when common stress wears down our glands. It causes exhaustion, it causes physical weaknesses, immune suppression, hormone imbalances, skin problems, and depression. The stomach and intestines are slowed down, and that can lead to bloating and inflammation, the reduction and the absorption of nutrients, heartburn. With limited digestive functions, many can lose weight due to that decrease in appetite. But also with the cortisol, it can encourage us to eat more, encouraging weight gain. Usually when we're stressed, if you're thinking, oh, I grabbed something like, that's really high carb or high sugar or high caffeine, that's really typical. And it usually causes a bit of overeating because these are high palatable foods, so we want to have more and more. We also begin to store glucose, and it's now excess in our bloodstream, so our bodily tissues do not burn it off the way it should. Reproductive hormones are decreased, so especially for women, chronic stress can lead to infertility as a possibility. Research in the past 10 years shows that chronic stress, is a factor in cell loss, and serious ailments from dementia to Parkinson's disease to heart disease. So much is happening to our body when it comes to these stressful situations. And, also we talked about different emotions. So how do we recognize different emotions in our bodies? Think about when you're feeling angry. What happens? Do you feel flushed? Do you feel your heart pumping? Do you feel tight, like you're clenching your fists or your jaw? Are you sweating? Do you have a headache? Anxiety, your heart's beating very fast. You have that tension that we mentioned. Increased sweating. Fear, those butterflies in your stomach. Shortness of breath. Dry mouth, all of these things, goes back to that response that we just went over, that science. Sadness, it has a lot of physical attributes. We have this empty feeling in our chest, empty feelings in our stomach, achy, tightness in our chests. Shame has a lot of physical attributes, heaviness in our chest, feeling sick to our stomachs, shrinking oneself to make you feel invisible, and your body temperature goes up. So it's really interesting. When we are not aware of how we're feeling, we're more likely to react without thinking of consequences. And those consequences, of course, can be interrelational. And those consequences also can be very much an effect on our own health, whether it's mental or physical, emotional. So thinking about that. Again, when I talk about doing mindfulness in PDHP and prevention work, people kind of look at me like, well, where does this exactly fit in? This is a really nice topic. Where does this fit in? Remember, there are risk factors, and one of those risk factors we work against is a perceived negative environment. A lot of times it comes up to a negative school environment. So how do we cope with that? When we see that kids are anxious over school, stressed out about school, learning different coping methods, trying to flip that script and make it more of a positive school climate, for example. How can we do those things? So it's interesting how it interrelates. And when we think about the adults in the room, we often know, and teachers are so genius on this, that the adult in the room, their energy can influence what's going on with the kids' energy in that room, right? So think about that. How does your stress trickle down? You know, how does your feeling trickle down? Does it? You know, and again, this is a question we ask the parents as well. How does that project to the kids? Okay. So we will be talking again on Friday. I hope that you're finding these helpful. Think about it. You know, what other things happen? What are ways that we can cope with stress? Share it along. You're going to help someone out. I'll talk to you Friday.